Welcome to the Friday Council, a podcast exploring modern life and the human condition. Join us each week for a new conversation. This is the Friday Council. Hello and welcome back to another episode of the Friday Council podcast. We are on episode 36 today. My name is Nav, and in front of me, to my right, is Daniel.
Hello. And
David to my left.
G'day.
Yeah. We're diving right in today, so Daniel is going to lead us on the topic.
Sure. We wanted to talk about today neurotypicality. We may have all heard the terms like neurodivergent and therefore neurotypicality, neurotypical, meaning regular brain, a typical neurology, and neurodivergent, as you can imagine, abnormal. Yeah, I suppose it's
different.
Has a negative connotation.
Strengths and challenges.
Abnormal doesn't necessarily mean negative, but we almost have an expert here, a lived expert.
In his own right, yeah.
Yeah. If anyone knows us personally or David personally, ADHD king. You can carry on from there. I won't speak for you.
Okay.
Do you want to give a quick background of
what?
Yeah.
What?
Yeah, ADHD.
Okay.
Your diagnosis.
Like, my personal case or ADHD in general? Is that what you're seeking?
Why not both?
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Well.
Yeah. What people might think of ADHD is,
okay.
And then and what it actually is.
So yeah,
to you at least.
I said before we started the pod, I feel like ADHD is almost sort of glamorized in society, like movies, music, just whatever culture. It's not really put in the same category as like depression, anxiety, autism. No one associates those things with like being cool or good. We understand that those things are negative, like they're struggles.
Negative connotation.
But yeah, ADHD, it's almost like, I think the perception is, you can't focus, you're always distracted, you're bouncing off walls sort of thing. It's like you're almost a child. That's the extent of it, whereas like it goes so much deeper than that. Of course, everyone with ADHD is different, but there's a lot of common traits that come with it. Like I said before the pod as well, the way I sum it up is like it's a little bit of everything. It's a little bit of depression, it's a little bit of anxiety, it's a little bit of autism, it's a little bit of OCD. It's just a little bit of everything mashed together. So it goes so much deeper than not being able to focus. Yes, that's a part of it. But then there's, I say, the self-doubt, rumination, overthinking, the list goes on.
I said before, sometimes I feel like this might be I haven't talked about it with any other neurotypicals, but I feel like it might be a pretty common neurotypical response to news stories or like social media when you see someone being praised, maybe who has clinical social anxiety, or it's been labelled, or clinical depression or whatever, some official title, and they say that they overcame their social anxiety. Like, I sat my driver's license test today, and it's like there's like a selfish feeling of like, hang on a second, like I had anxiety about my driving lesson too. Where's my parade?
Yeah, big deal.
Yeah, which is I recognize it's pretty selfish, but I think it's probably pretty common. Do you ever feel that? You're like, hang on a second, like I have depression, something. I feel down sometimes as well.
I think, I know it's a natural tendency for humans, or maybe it's just me, is when someone celebrates something or is going through something in triumph, you always have that, like we talked in our first episode, tall poppy syndrome. It's like, well, here they are achieving something that I wish I could do. That might be one element of it. The other one too, like you said, we all go through valleys and peaks through life, and some have it a lot harder than others, but that doesn't necessarily mean your experiences or if it's the same thing, like taking a driver's test, doesn't mean because one struggled with it more than the other that they can celebrate it more or less. It's just, I think you do in life need to have some successes that you celebrate, even the smallest. It's like if you're depressed, for example, maybe even getting out of bed is your first challenge. Like, that doesn't mean people who have been depressed for years struggling to do that, they take that leap. Doesn't mean you're like, we're all going through our own journeys in life. It's not a competition.
That's a good way of putting it. And I also think, like, we often make this point, or I often make this point, flip it on its head and be grateful that your anxiety or your depression, as much as you may experience it, is right, because all humans will experience it. It's not as bad as someone. The fact that you aren't, debilitated by it, just flip it and be like, wow, it's tempting to be like, oh, they're celebrating something so small, but be like, I'm glad that I don't get that anxious that I would feel the need to like celebrate that so much. Like the fact that it's that bad for them, be grateful that it's not that bad for you, if that makes any sense.
I know what you mean. It's impossible to tell. I remember thinking shortly after starting my relationship with my now long-term partner, like, wow, damn, never felt like love like this before. And I see it with other people. Very true. But other people, you can't imagine being more in love with someone. It's entirely possible that I could be more in love with someone else. Is brutal, and same for everyone. Like you can never prove that you're the most in love you could ever possibly be. Same in this situation with like anxiety. You think in your head, your experience as a neurotypical person, you probably don't have as severe social anxieties. You're referencing that and you go, okay, I pushed through it. It's pretty bad. I can imagine maybe 10% worse than that, but it's entirely possible, and you'll never be able to prove. Someone with clinical social anxiety, it's like on a completely different level, like the equivalent of smoking one joint and smoking 10 joints. Like you can't imagine what the experience is like. Yeah. Do you agree?
Yeah, that's exactly right. And I guess, you just have to come from it from a perspective, as I say, of course, all humans experience anxiety, but is it affecting your quality of life? And is it like debilitating? And you'll know if it is or not. Like, are there things that you want to do that you keep not doing because your anxiety or depression, whatever it is getting in the way? Is that Nirvana song goes, something in the way? Think of it like that. Just like a quick example, you saw like last year with me, how anxious I can get. My life was put on hold before I got my wisdom teeth extracted because my brain was just fixated on that. And I had like
one hurdle at a time. It's hard to juggle. Well, I don't know. I'm not speaking for you, but
I had like a month of hell, as you would probably well remember, and also the same.
It was tough to watch.
Yeah,
so it's like, just let it go, man. Come on, you can do it.
But the way my brain is wired, I just as much as I can logically say I should, the emotional part deep down in my brain doesn't allow me to do that. Whereas I think a neurotypical person would be anxious about, nobody's going to be looking forward to getting teeth extracted, but they could sort of put it off until like the day before. Like, well, that's 4 weeks away from now, and then it wouldn't be until a day before that, shit, I'm a bit nervous. Whereas for me, it was just on my mind the whole time, every moment I was awake. So
yeah, it was brutal. I could tell. It felt mentally exhausting. It seemed mentally exhausting in general, but especially mentally exhausting. Yeah.
Well, I could go both ways, and some, like, let's say, for example, you book a holiday in advance. Let's say it's 6 months down the line. You can live that excitement and joy for like the whole 6 months. Wow, I can't wait! Like counting down the days, like, and it consumes you that way. I had that for my last holiday, but then if it's something negative, it just seems a whole lot more amplified and a whole lot more. It stands out a lot more.
Like we talked about Lucas with the positive and negative criticism and encouragements from outside. You got if you're expecting to be affected by one positive one, you got to be able to, you got to be prepared to take the equal amount in the other direction.
I think another like good metaphor for it is if you think of someone, if they had like a physical disability, they were had one leg, you're not going to expect them to run 100 meters as well as someone with two legs, are you? So think of that in the brain. Right? If someone's brain is wired a certain way, it's literally like a handicap.
From your perspective, do you sometimes feel like it's that stark of a difference with like that metaphor is like a very good metaphor? Do you think it's like the equivalent of running a race with one leg?
Probably not as extreme as that, but just to like make it. Yeah, use an extreme example to bring it. The other example, the other example I use is everyone, I think, or most people have sympathy for like a Down syndrome. I know that's a little bit different. That's a not a learning disability. It's a
global.
I don't know, or autism. I think most people, you're not expecting someone with autism. You're not holding them to the same standards as an average Joe, are you? So again, it's just more extreme example, but these things like depression, anxiety, ADHD, dyslexia, whole bunch of them are somewhat less severe than those. And so, yeah, it falls in like this murky grey area where you expect these people, to be average Joes.
Yeah.
Like with the leg example, they're not obviously... Sorry.
Yeah.
They're not obviously retarded. Like
Yeah. So, it falls in this sort of grey area where it can be...
And you're not mentally retarded either.
No, it's got nothing to do with intelligence.
Yeah.
You can be extremely dumb, or you can be extremely intelligent, or any around. Yeah, it's a separate thing to it. It's not correlated to intelligence.
Yeah.
But yeah, think of it like that as a mental handicap. It might not be as severe as, say, missing a leg, but it's a form of that.
Yeah. I was just asking to get a gauge. Yeah, to get a gauge, because the only way to tell is by asking and talking to these people, like, and interacting with them. Like with your dentist example, like it was obvious. If it was obvious to me as an outsider, I can only then still just imagine how much spinning around that must have been doing in your head. Because what are you gonna say now?
Well, I was just gonna say, I from in the past, it's not like I've had a huge amount of encounters, but if you've ever spoken to someone who has Down syndrome, it's almost like there's a filter that they don't have to worry about, which you could, I don't know how to articulate it, but take a page from. It's like all this anxiety that I'm going through, if I were to be, and it probably wouldn't affect me, because you just, like the way the brain's wired for them.
I think I know.
It's like, they don't have to worry about that. So it's almost like, I don't know what the right word is here. It's almost like
a superpower?
Not a superpower, but like we now have to experience that where they wouldn't have to. So it's a benefit for them in that sense compared to us.
Yeah. And I think a good point to add on to that then is say things like anxiety, depression, whatever it is, you can be almost assured that the person suffering that is their own worst self-critic. I certainly am in my case, and I think that's very common. So you might be thinking, this guy's celebrating getting his driver's license. Imagine what their self-talk is like. They would be beating, like I can only imagine my self-talk before a license test. I'd be saying like, why are you such a pussy? Why are you such a piece of shit? Just absolutely ravaging myself.
Should have booked this months ago.
Yeah. So you can be, I would say in 99% of cases, the person suffering those whatever you want to call them, mental illnesses, learning disabilities, will be, if you're thinking poorly of them, they'll be thinking 10 times more poorly about themselves than you are thinking of them. So
I don't know if this is somewhat related, but as an example, my wife compared to myself, like calling up helplines or strangers or whatever, I find it like difficult, but not to the point where it's like, oh my gosh, like I can't do it. What am I going to say? Like I kind of just ring and then go with the flow. Whereas with my wife, whenever she has to call, it's like, okay, what do I say? Like, and she'll revert to like an email. So if, for example, if I was like, hey, can you call the insurance or something? She'd be more inclined to want to email. And it's like, no, but you just call. Like it's you're gonna find out the answer straight away.
They definitely prioritize. Like they know that emailers are gonna be able to take more. Shit, like delays and stuff.
Just like slow down. It's like, you leave something in the help form or whatever. It's like you wait 2 or 3 days where it's like, I just want to know the answer. So
you're showing to them by just sending an email that you're basically a little bit of a bitch.
But it's like a huge struggle for her. So I don't. For me, like it's hard to sympathize in that way. It's like I'm not sure how she's feeling, but if it's that difficult for her that she has to write an email, maybe I need to just
and I can completely relate to that because I'm exactly the same. And and that's what I mean. I'm my own worst self-critic in those cases. I'm thinking, why do I find this such a struggle? There must be something severely wrong with me. This is ridiculous. It's such an insignificant thing, but still it's problematic for my brain. Now I can bring myself to make phone calls. It's not that's not a massive one, but it's still never natural. That's the description I think I mentioned to you the other day. I wish these things would feel natural. I can force myself to do some of these things, but it never feels natural, which is incredibly frustrating. It's like I'm always on edge. So it is like a form of anxiety. Like when I go to a supermarket, order a coffee is the one I've given that example before.
Yeah.
I'm always thinking 2 steps ahead. Are they going to give me a number? Are they going to write my name on it? Is that? And then I'm 2 steps ahead. It's just nice if I could just go off the flow.
Or even leave it for me. It's like the parking aspect. You pull into a oh no, I've gone too far. I can't go there. There's someone behind me. I have to can't reverse. I'll just find another park.
Yeah, and that was me
Things like
parking
that.
as well. And I'm thinking like when I went into the city last week, going into a paid car park, and I'd never used the machine before. I'm like thinking, oh shit, how do I use the machine? People going to be watching me. I'm going to make a fool of myself. And like, it's horrible. I figured it out, but that's what I mean. I'm going through all those thoughts, and I wish I wasn't going through those thoughts. So as I say, I can bring myself to overcome it, but I still go through that rigmarole every single time, which I wish I didn't go through.
In defense, and possibly a defense of neurotypicals, it's obviously very subjective, and like you said, even with people with diagnosed ADHD, they can be completely different from one another. Because it's so subjective, there's no way for us to truly imagine what it's like for someone who's clinical social anxiety. And even people with clinical social anxiety officially are going to vary wildly as well. So equally, there's also going to be no way of proving how much our behaviors have instilled in us. If we hadn't lived the life the environment we had been in, how much of social anxiety would affect us now. I could probably put that a bit better. So, it is entirely possible that, say, for example, Nav, you let yourself, your anxiety beat you, and you didn't go for your driver's license. And I didn't, and I went for my driver's license. It's entirely possible we felt the exact same level of anxiety, and you were more of a bitch than me in that situation. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I know what you're saying.
So
No,
to put it bluntly, I'm struggling to explain it.
I see.
But you know what I'm saying?
See the point that you're making.
Yeah.
And
So there's no way to prove it either.
No, but even say if that is the case, I guess be thankful that you're so much stronger. If that's what it is, I say we wouldn't mock, to use an extreme example, if a small female child, a 10-year-old female child, couldn't beat up Mike Tyson, we wouldn't rubbish her for that, would we? Because we acknowledge that she's nowhere near as strong. It's not a fair fight. So be thankful that you do have some sort of, whatever you call it, mental resilience. Be grateful for that. That's a thing that I'd love to have.
Yeah, I think that's especially a frustration. I know probably with a lot of older generation, like the boomers, where they'll feel like the pendulum swung way too far on the other way, and it's like you can't just tell people to harden up, which to a certain extent, especially boys, has like benefits. Like get over yourself, go, make that tackle, or go do your license. Like I'm not going to drive you around all day. Get over it, and people need that to some extent. And so it's all a matter of opinion, really. But I think a lot of older generation, especially, possibly, I think I probably somewhat agree, slightly agree, in that it's gone too far one way, and in general, more people need to be told to get over it and harden up. Well, sometimes
this
it's going to be real circumstantial.
It will be circumstantial. There's an example I'd heard for I think like the Vietnam War, for example, as someone who hasn't fought in that war, right? If they've gone through such trauma and seen the death of friends and their squadron mates or whatever you want to call it, and they're reliving that, it's like the hardest time of their life. But then for someone, let's say Gen Z, starting their first job as a barista making coffees, and the most stress they're experiencing is when it's busy, like I can't keep up with orders. Like you're still experiencing anxiety, but it's at the same time, it's like it's not a competition. Like you can't.
Everything is relative.
It's all relative. It's all subjective. It's like you're not one upping. Like it's a natural thing where it's like, oh, my granddad died. It's like, oh well, I've gone through that too. You'll get time will heal all wounds. It's like, first of all, you wouldn't say that to someone, but it's like we all experience things completely differently.
That's right. And to add to that, everyone has different strengths and weaknesses. So, for example, I could handle losing large amounts of money way better than the two of you.
Yes.
So, but you can handle ordering a coffee way better than me and whatever, having girlfriends and just a whole host of other things. So chances are these, if you lost 15 grand in one sitting, what would your mental state be like?
It'd be like you with a dentist. It'd be all I could think of.
That's what I mean. So we all have strengths and weaknesses. So chances are these people who can't, sit their license or whatever, they'll have a strength and deal with something that you would really struggle with. So that's another way of looking at it. And that's the frustration of it. As I say, it seems very frustrating to me that I struggle with seemingly such insignificant things like ordering a coffee. But then there's other things that seem extremely hard that I deal well with. So, everyone has strengths and weaknesses, and that's right. It's not a competition. Everything's relative.
Yep.
Yeah.
I thought we'd end. Yeah, but you're basically saying having empathy is a good thing.
Yes, it
maybe
is.
we should have more. We should always have more.
Yes.
As much empathy as we can manage. I always imagined we'd end this podcast on a happy note with empathy and love and kindness, everyone. But we do it now. Yeah,
we're all human. I can just easily get frustrated with other people who I see struggling with something that I'm good at. It could even be something as simple as your parents struggling with something on the computer and want help from you, and I was like, figure it out. So we're all human. So it's always easy to look at someone who's struggling with something that we don't struggle with and be frustrated.
It's a good example. It's like I used to get frustrated with my dad coming and asking how to do something, but then like touch wood, I've never had to change a tire on my car. Like when the time comes, if it happens, which it most likely will in the future, like I'll have to go through that experience and get over it. And if I came to dad and he's like, "Oh, you just figure it out," I'd probably feel the same way.
I think it's like it brings to mind like helicopter parenting, or like a child who's just super helicopter parented and cushioned their whole lives. They're gonna be way more sensitive to anxiety. That's maybe it. Yeah. Back to my other point. It's like if you just weren't so coddled, you could handle anxiety better.
I'm going to disagree. I know the point that you're making, and it may be somewhat true, but it's not a hard and fast rule, because I would hardly say that I was coddled and yet I struggle with anxiety. So
yeah, I'm talking in general. I think in general that's probably happening a bit more.
You might. I wouldn't necessarily say that you're going to be more susceptible to anxiety. You might be less resilient, which could tie into anxiety, I guess. But I don't think it's a hard and fast rule, because there's also probably people who were coddled who grow up to be, I don't know, very strong people. Yeah, it could turn out that way. And I think just to go back to the point where you said, maybe people should harden up. I don't disagree that, you have to try and conquer your fears, and it gives you strength when you do it. I don't know it's necessarily a case of saying harden up, but a guiding hand. Someone say, rather than enable and say, okay, just stay at home, don't sit your license. I'll sit in the car with you while you do your test or whatever. Something to give that person a guiding hand. Yeah. So, and yes, to an extent, sometimes you do have to jump off the deep end. But that can also, if you do that horrible old school way of just harden up, mate, we all know how that can end as well, because people will don't see a way out in extreme cases and just kill themselves. And then I think you regret saying harden up after that, wouldn't you?
That brings to mind, I was going to say, so you used the old school example of harden up. And I think in that case, because you think back in the day, obviously way less diagnoses, whether that is because there genuinely were less or because it's less recognised. I think some people, possibly you might agree, possibly to myself to some extent, self-medicate and then use, drugs or I'm thinking drugs in my term, so like in TV shows, content you watch, anything that goes into your body to deal with those like anxieties. Do you think people who are more neurodivergent perhaps do that more or self-medicate?
Oh yes, almost certainly yes. Yeah. I know there's high correlation between any sort of learning disability, mental illness, and substance abuse. So I'd say yes. Of course, it's not limited to them. There'll be neurotypicals, regular people who do that as well, but it's more relative to the average population, it's of a
that's
higher
what I mean,
percentage.
relative.
Yeah.
Because they all do it. I want to ask you guys, do you guys think there is such a thing as overpathologization? Just on a large scale, societal scale. And I don't know if you guys think it's helpful that that diagnoses are becoming more specific. There's more names and more diagnoses that can be made. Do you think it'd be a good thing if they get so specific that the majority of people can be diagnosed with something? Because it's
it's a hard one.
Because and maybe a second part from that might help is I can imagine receiving a diagnosis after feeling slightly different or like an outsider growing up, perhaps being especially like labeled with autism. It has like a hard luck, man, like negative connotation. When, like you said, with the Down syndromes, they have pros about it that we struggle, and like ADHD, you're like way better at some things than us, and like you're mentioning. So, do you think you can get overdiagnosed as a society? It can be a good or bad thing?
You probably can. Yeah,
I think so. I also think there's a lot of crossover between like symptoms and diagnosis. So, like, let's say if you're talking in medical terms, you might have the flu, you might have COVID, if you've got a sore throat, or there's so many things. So it's like when you seek to find like a diagnosis for something that you're going through, for me it'd be almost like a questioning it, like, is this actually true? Like, or then I'd probably, like you say, then you start over pathologizing. You'd be like, oh no, maybe there's actually another answer. So then I'd look for like, I don't know, cancer's not the best example, but if you're going through chemo, there might be like, oh no, surely there's another thing. Like, is this actually what I have? Kind of like
I know what you mean.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You like the willingness to accept a diagnosis for me would be quite difficult.
Yeah.
I don't know
What do you reckon?
Yeah,
I think I know what you mean.
That's an interesting point. I guess it's a little bit different in my case, given that I sought a diagnosis. It wasn't given to me as a kid as some unknowing child, or even if that would happen in some cases with adults. So a little bit different for me. But I can see that, okay, so I think especially males maybe have a tendency to be in denial. They might be ashamed if they were diagnosed with something, dyslexia, ADHD, anxiety, whatever. No, I'm a man, I don't have this.
Yep.
So I could see that some people could take it the wrong way and be sort of in denial about it. I think, like you always read stories about people that you'd never suspect diagnosed with, like athletes diagnosed with bipolar, movie stars, and it's like, wow. And that doesn't necessarily mean that they're in denial about it, but I think some people would be in denial about something because it does come with somewhat, especially things like bipolar, comes with a bit of a stigma. Where it's like, oh, I'm weak, or there's something wrong with me.
There is stigmas with it. I feel like there's stigmas, positive or negative. There's always a stigma that comes with the diagnoses, because everyone has an experience. Like if you say ADHD to someone, they have like an image in their head, like one thing. They're not thinking of, oh, ADHD can look like lots of people. They have like one, like like a little snotty nose, like hyper, like kid at school, maybe. I want to read you guys some symptomologies. I was listening to a podcast and they talked about this, and it was the best. It made me reflect in a real Halls way. So
go for it.
Just imagine this is it's satire if it doesn't come across super obvious, but they call it being diagnosed with neurotypical syndrome disorder. So making out as if being neurotypical is a disorder. So neurotypical syndrome disorder describes a pattern of thoughts and behaviors. This does not apply to all neurotypicals. Just because someone displays one or more of these behaviors does not make them neurotypical. Neurotypical disorder, NTD, appears to have genetic causes and can remain underdiagnosed until school age or into adulthood. People with NSD, what is this? Neurotypical syndrome disorder, NSD. People with NSD typically live a normal lifespan. Many have satisfying relationships. They may have children, despite the risk of passing on the disorder. Socially, NSDs prefer to congregate in close-knit groups. NSDs prefer to discuss the weather, sports, and other people's problems rather than having deep conversations. They engage in small talk regularly as a means of handling their feelings of inadequacy in conversations. They have their own language quirks and that help them express their thoughts, e.g. the ball is in your court. straight from the horse's mouth. Recent studies show that NSDs find it difficult to stay focused. They are steadfast in their loyalty to a political party or politician, sometimes in the face of evidence that suggests their beliefs are faulty. NSDs are ruled by the crowd. Being admired by others is critical for an NSD. To maintain a feeling of normalcy, they will often exaggerate their purchases, accomplishments, or travel in order to be accepted by the group. They require continuous validation from partners and people around them. This results in them being unable to work, live, and be alone in general. You get the point,
Yes,
right? It's
yeah,
like a
yeah.
satire, but you could pathologize lots of things, and that relates to my other question.
Categorically.
Pathologization.
So I think it's important to take the good with the bad. So it's not hard and fast that ADHD, autism is negative. It's just a different set of strengths and weaknesses. And so it's important to also incorporate the positives. I like to think of it as risk management. You lower the downside and try and maximize the upside. So that's what I'm trying to do with my life. How can I minimize the negatives, the anxiety, the rumination stuff, and maximize whatever my creativity, thinking outside the box, whatever ability to sit and do something, frowse on end if I enjoy it, whatever's. How can I maximize those while minimize the downsides? So like you said, neurotypicality comes with some traits that I wouldn't want. So
obvious. Do you have anything to add?
No, continue.
Obviously, I was going to say that is obviously satire, but and a neurotypicality will obviously never be a diagnosis because it is simply the majority. They're not going to come up with well, there is a name for it, but it doesn't. It's not pathologized. Like the symptomology isn't as specific. What do you guys think about whether society in general will ever be fully inclusive for neurodivergent people? I was just as an analogy. Like in the same way this culture was built on neurotypicality, in the same way that this society was built on like majority Christians and majority capitalists. Like it's where we got to today because of neurotypicality. So being neurodivergent to an extent perhaps might be equivalent to being like a communist and expecting society to mold around you. And I think it might just be a harsh reality that as long as, like, if you're in the minority, you're just going to earn anything. Whether that's political minority, religious minority, you're just going to have a rougher time than the majority who don't have to think about it.
And that's the way I try and take it on the chin and sort of be as proud about it as I can in my own way. Where was I going to go with that?
Will it ever be inclusive?
Yeah.
Because I think a lot of people imagine this future where everyone's like super included, but I think it's always just going to be tough. Like tough luck.
I think it can. Well, if we it might not be a perfect example, but if we consider a real obvious example when black people weren't really accepted in America, they pretty much are accepted today, except for a tiny majority, a minority who are genuinely racist. So if we can think of that, they were a minority. America was, I suppose technically it was originally Native American, but white people took over and became the dominant race, ethnicity. Yeah. And then they oppressed black people.
Anyone listening, take David's words as he means them about white people becoming dominant. Take it, don't misconstrue his words. Take it how he obviously is intending it.
Yeah.
In the context of
cut that out and make me
in the context of generational upbringing.
And so black people are still a minority in America, but they're accepted for the most part. So I guess that could be an example to look. And there's probably other examples of minorities throughout history who were the one that never seems to get acceptance of the Jews. Wherever they go, they still, But it might never be perfect, but I think if we can have pathways, especially pathways for young people, so that we can try and give them the right guidance pathway to utilize their abilities and hopefully minimize those downsides or learn to deal with the downsides, I think we can optimize. It might never be perfect, probably, but it can be good. And I think it is getting better because there is so much awareness about this stuff. yeah, of course, it's important not to then use that as an excuse for kids or adults to then do nothing with their lives. But yeah, if you can get them in pathways, say, especially at a young age, to capitalize on their strengths, whatever they be, then I think it can be optimized. And I think going back, you sort of touched on it, like in all likelihood, these sort of conditions were always around in the same numbers as they are today. It's just they weren't diagnosed because everyone was so ignorant. And I think in a lot of those cases, these people would have hardened up, and you touched on it, they would have just had unhealthy coping mechanisms, probably historically alcohol. The rates of alcohol consumption continue going down. If you go back to, a couple hundred years ago, Victorian Britain era, everyone was getting smashed all the time. So there would have been
it's pure debauchery.
Yeah, so there would have been a lot of people there with learning disabilities, mental illness, who were just getting drunk all day, every day. So I think it would have just been unhealthy coping mechanisms. There would have been all sorts of other unhealthy, sex addiction, whatever, lots of unhealthy,
Yeah.
So I think it is good. Hopefully we can get pathways to, decrease people ending up, unhealthy coping mechanisms and getting them just on a good track that's their own trajectory.
Well spoken. Yeah.
Sorry, it's making me think of like how we all go through different like upbringings we talked about with Kieran a few weeks ago, and how that affects like your...
Loving these callbacks. Sorry.
No, that's fine. Like how it affects your ability to like deal with stuff in the past. So I don't know if this is related or not, but and then kind of what David was saying in terms of like let's use the black people in America, for example. Whilst then what would widely accept them, they now also would say have a majority in like the NBA, for example, or like NFL. So how the pendulum can swing like so quickly in society. When you start trying to like cater to, I don't know, every race, religion, if it was to be completely equal, like I just don't think you could ever get to that point. And like what you said before, in some things you're just going to have to like accept it and get over it. And it's like, well, what can you do? Like maybe not the best example, but like here, for example, we have students going for scholarships. Like there'll be scholarships available to certain ethnic groups that aren't available to other ethnic groups.
Yep.
Is that fair? Well, you could say no, but then in some ways, like you say, you got to have pathways to help, I guess, the collective of society go up, and some will exponentially receive more benefit, and others might be like more stagnant and take some time. But I think over time, as society, like we're enabling the whole of society upwards. It's better than up and down. I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, it makes sense.
Makes sense, yeah. Some of them the minorities are going to be literally impossible to like a hardcore Muslim thinking all women should be in burqas. You can't. Like you can't.
Yeah.
It just,
Just
it's
can't
literally
enforce
impossible.
that,
Especially if
or someone who is like severe autism, they're probably never going to be like
no noise in the city for like
so they're just going to have extra support for their life, whether that's family or government assistance. So
I forgot where I was going with this point, but hopefully it comes back to me. I always half jokingly say that autism is the future. Like, I feel like autism makes for good workers in some, as long as it's not like non-verbal, like full blown, but like a little bit, like a moderate amount of autism, I think is a superpower. They very clearly have some advantages over neurotypicals with their hyper focus on certain things, and with the way the world's going, you need to be like a real expert in one thing. I think it's too easy to be like a super generalist. So that leads me to my other question. Do you think, you mentioned it before, that it's just purely recognition that's increasing the numbers? How much do you guys think environment or perhaps pollution or something is causing these abnormalities to increase in number over the years? some people say vaccines cause, the vaccines cause
Yeah.
autism is the classic meme. It's pretty heavily memed.
Yeah.
Do you guys think it's 100% just recognition?
No, not 100%, especially if we take sort of more generalized like anxiety, depression, which anyone can suffer those to, like people go through phases in their life where they've never been depressed and then something horrible happens and they have severe depression. So that can happen to anyone regardless of the way your brain is wired. I think those might be increasing not just due to recognition, but the way society is constructed now, less social interaction, the online social media, stuff like that. That probably is increasing those, not just purely recognition.
Yep.
Yeah.
I think I'd agree with that.
Like adolescence, for example. I think we talked about this in a real early podcast, and how social media, although we're in what you would class as time where everything is so readily available, relationships be able to communicate in that sense, but we're still more lonely than ever because it's almost like, it's kind of selfish. Like we're all selfish to some extent, and it becomes about yourself. So when you like social media, for example, we could all participate in this big game and post what's going on in our lives, and some people will generate bigger followings than others, and that's just the way it is. Like there will be people who really want to become YouTube famous or whatever, try their best, and they just never achieve that. So I think, well, I don't know where I was going with this more, but like we're all gonna have like trials and tribulations. It doesn't matter. But then it's so hard to say that. I don't know if that makes I feel like I'm just going on wild tangents and not.
Yeah, you might have to be more
rounding out
clear.
what
I'm not
saying.
fully.
Yeah.
Can you explain it any other way? What your point? Or maybe we'll go to David.
Yeah,
see
go
if
to
you can explain
David
it.
first. Yeah.
Okay. It's a little slight tangent, but I remember like having this discussion with my doctor about depression, and I said something to him to the effect of like, I feel like there must be a natural way to remedy this, because 100 years ago, 200 years ago, I wouldn't have access to antidepressants. And I think he may have misinterpreted where I was going with that, but he sort of said to me, and I can't remember exactly how it was, but he said something about, depression diagnoses are going up because of awareness. But he said if you look at manic depression, which is like where you Hill Morton Hospital sort of thing, that's going way down. Maybe not in the diagnoses, but the treatment of it, because he had the medication. So it's real clear that you give them, whatever antipsychotic medication, and it works. It stops them from, going nuts, if you will. So that's again not the clearest of points, but I guess it just that's maybe a concrete example of how something that is obviously very real, manic depression, can be effectively treated. In 100, 200 years ago, I think those people would have been there, but they just would have been, and they're still there in society today. Like a lot of the people probably living on the street in town that we see are probably severely mentally ill. And if they got the right treatment, it might get their life back on track.
Yeah, depression's. I think they're almost worthy of splitting into two different categories. Like the depression, anxieties, because I mean, autism is like you can see like the structure of the brain is like it's not developed the same way. It's not. I'm not saying as much.
Different.
I know it's like like when my mum's a teacher aide, so she's very familiar with this stuff. She says it's like a normal brain like branches out and then comes together and comes together nice and symmetrically, but an autistic brain just kind of branches out and doesn't quite it like freezes before it's fully melded together. So that does, and there's no gene that they can find for autism. So I don't know, it just kind of, maybe I'm being paranoid, but I think it's something. I mean, I think it's more likely than not that out of the 10,000 poisons we're exposed to in utero and during our formative years is having at least something to do with the increasing autism rates. And a lot of it, most of it will be under the radar. Like, again, you're never going to, well, you could prove it with enough science, but I might be slightly more autistic than I would have been had my mum not been exposed to phthalates when she was pregnant with me, you know?
Yeah,
And-
I see,
Right.
yeah.
And so, like, in general, it's like at the bell curve.
Yeah,
It might
yeah.
just be slowly shifting to the right.
Yeah.
There's no real way of proving it, but
No.
I think more people should assume that. I feel like, rather than just it's just increased recognition, because I don't know. I think it's you know what I mean.
Yeah.
I think it's
Yeah,
just more likely than not that there's some kind of chemicals that are doing that to us and just
Could
pushing
be.
the population in one way.
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah.
I just wish people would maybe think about it more often because I feel like I'm going crazy sometimes.
Right. I think what I misinterpreted before when you're talking about like environment, like
Like
childhood, your childhood environment.
Yeah, I mean like environmental
Yeah.
toxins and stuff.
Yes,
Yeah.
I misinterpreted that as more like as your
sorry.
social like, environment that you grow up in.
Yeah, I wasn't clear enough. Yeah,
No, that's fine.
but yeah, because and it makes sense for depression, anxiety that the social environment you grow up in could make you more sensitive to
Yeah.
situations that trigger that stuff. Like you said, trigger.
Yeah.
But
yeah,
like autism, you don't have a choice.
'Cause I
really.
think-
and it often comes in like at 2 to 3, 4 years old.
Yeah.
Like it's not
Yeah.
straight away. So
Well,
yeah,
it probably is straight away. It's just that it's not recognizable because
it's not recognizable.
all babies
True,
are
true.
pretty dumb to
that-
put it.
But that's around the time they get
Really?
vaccines, man.
Yeah,
Formative
it's just that
years.
it's not until kids start learning to read and write, socialize, that it's like, oh, geez, he's off. You know, when you're just breastfeeding all day and playing around in a cot, like it's probably pretty hard to recognize.
It's like because like the non-verbal,
Yeah.
like there's one
it's
way to
not
tell.
really a thing.
yeah.
Yeah,
That's a good
so
point.
it's
So
I shouldn't say the vaccines,
Yeah.
guys, in that tone because I genuinely think there's something to it.
well, I would
I
assume
should stop naming
not a
myself.
parent, but I would assume that when you start getting to that age of like reading and comprehension, and you start, you'd probably start to notice that in your child if they were struggling more with
Yep.
their ABCs than a standard child would,
Yep.
or not being able to focus. Well, yeah,
Mhm.
I think like when you're talking about recognition and environment, this is slightly different, but with like society now, we're more accepting of mental health issues. So it's more common now if someone was to say like, I'm taking the day off work like as a mental health day,
Mhm.
we accept that.
Yeah.
Whereas, I don't know, a couple decades, you'd be like, no, you can't, like, you're not physically sick, get back to work, like, move on with it. And so I think as over time we recognize different, I guess, social norms? Yeah, would you say it's neurotypical now, or is it, neurodivergent? Over time, it was like iron out, and we'll start to understand more as humans, is how we all operate.
I get what you mean. Yeah. And it comes back to the empathy thing.
Yeah,
It's
it's
like
an
understanding
empathy
that
thing.
realities can be
vastly different.
Yes.
like crazy different.
Yeah.
We have no real. I don't think I'm so fascinated and gripped by different drugs for like self-medicating purposes, but because undoubtedly they open your eyes, you can't help but because it literally changes your perspective.
Yeah.
So I think it's like a good testing ground. I also wonder whether sometimes when I have a psychedelic or something, I wonder if that's kind of what a schizophrenic person just normally operates like.
yeah.
I know in the early days they thought it was a like a psychomimetic or something. So it was like it would mimic psychopathy and schizophrenia, and they would use it to try and to get an understanding of schizophrenia. Don't think it kind of patterned out that way, but can't help but think that sometimes, yeah, like some people might just be, if you take speed as a neurotypical cocaine,
Yeah.
it's possible that someone's some type of ADHD brain just like kind of runs
Yeah.
like that always.
Yes.
Well,
So I
no,
think
I
in
think
those ways they're good tools to
Yeah.
Well,
make you aware.
It'd be the same with like if you're smoking weed. For some people, it just would make them completely lazy and have no desire to do anything, and for others, it might make them more creative and want to achieve. And like you said, if you were to partake in that, you'd start writing a to-do list and you just tick it all off in one go because your brain's just
Yeah, and
go.
there'll be people who live their lives on both ends of that spectrum.
Yeah.
So when you're messing with your own consciousness that way, I think it helps you to be able to appreciate other people's brains.
Yes.
And again, like we said with the love thing, you don't know love until you feel it, and you can't imagine being more in love until you feel that. And it's the same with with these drugs that, or anything that alters your state of mind, you can like, you can't imagine what it's like to be on mushrooms if you've never done mushrooms. Like, you have to, you know.
Yeah.
What do you think, Dave?
I agree, and I think that's an example. It sort of demonstrates how it's not just a thought process thing, isn't it? It shows that there's a literal different wiring in your brain when you can, because that's what substances do. They play off the wiring. And yeah, when you take a drug and it plays with the wiring and it completely changes who you are, that's sort of an example that, your unmedicated, drugged brain is wired differently. So for example, for me, like when I drink alcohol, well, all anxiety in the world is gone.
Yeah.
So that changes something in my brain that shuts down that part of my brain that's obviously far more activated than I think a regular person. And alcohol slows that process down, and it's like, oh geez, now I can be in a room with hundreds of people and I can talk to everyone and I can do things that I could bring myself to do when I'm sober, but I'd feel very uncomfortable.
Takes a layer off. Like, yeah.
It's like the self-medicating thing. I'm curious for you, David, if you find on any drugs, whether that be alcohol, cannabis, whatever, are there parts of that where you think this is what it must be like for Daniel and Nav all the time?
Yeah,
in terms of the lower anxiety.
I think MDMA would be the closest to that.
Yeah.
Where I'm MDMA.
Oh, you think we're just like equivalent of you on MDA
happy.
all the time?
Yeah, not like off your face, feeling amazing, but when MDMA makes me feel, I don't know, very connected to people, makes me feel, I guess, love. A love that I don't feel when I'm sober. It's like, oh, wow, I could envision myself like having a romantic, long-term romantic relationship when I'm in that frame of mind. There's something that's switched on in my brain that it's like, geez, yeah, I could see how you could have a long-term relationship if you felt like this. So that would probably be the closest. Yeah, I feel, very connected and loving, which everyone does.
Yes.
But
I know what you mean. That's cool.
Could it be like not say it is because it's chemically changes your wiring,
yes.
but if you would like to have a placebo lolly, for example, and you just train your brain to think like, I'm having like a MDMA high on having a barley sugar or something. Could you manually like change
like
the
Pavlovian dog thing?
Yeah, exactly. Possibly, where it's like,
because
I'm just gonna. It's like, sorry, just to quickly end here, but like people who self-affirmation, like for some, I think it might just be stupid. Like you're just talking yourself. Anyway, point being that wires you to be, I can go and do what I want today. I'm going to go out and change the world. Whereas it's like, no.
It could work, but I think it goes deeper because first of all, you have to not know that it's a placebo because that's how placebo works. There's a chance that it's the real thing. And so I think that shows just how amazing your brain is. Yes, it can be tricked. I don't know if you can trick yourself consciously though. So if I know it's not actually MDMA, I don't think it's going to work. But because it really is, your brain is magic. If it thinks that there's a possibility that it is MDMA, then that can work because it is changing the wiring. But I don't think that can work.
It's like that mirror thing where it's like you put a mirror between both your hands and if like someone punches your left hand or whatever, you feel it.
You got a fake arm there. Yeah.
I can't explain it very well, but like you mentally, you feel the pain, but
someone just whacked a prosthetic arm
exactly
where your right arm should be. And you feel it. I think I just had a thought. We're talking about, obviously, we mentioned drugs. Everyone automatically assumes illicit drugs, but essentially, like ADHD medication is like a methamphetamine derivative, isn't it? Is it not? Or
Not quite.
Okay. That's a bit derivative of me to say, but you know what I mean. Like that brings them to normalcy. It makes them. It makes them appear normal from an outside perspective. Anyway, I'm sure they're not feeling what we've like. I'm sure it's more sedative and like kind of like darker than regular neurotypicals do normally. But at least it makes them talk and energetically the same.
Yeah, well, for some people it don't. Well,
for some people,
I tried Ritalin. I haven't tried the other amphetamines or stimulants available.
Yeah,
but it didn't work for me. But yeah, for some people it works amazingly. I read it all the time, and I'm very envious on Reddit when people say, "Oh, I just started Ritalin," and I'm crying. This is what it feels like to be a normal person. I'm like, oh fuck, I wish I could feel that. So that can work, but again, even within ADHD, everyone's brain is wired differently. So
I also am just remembering now there's an argument that boys in general, I mean, a lot of these diagnoses show up differently in the two genders, but boys in general, in terms, I'm thinking about schooling, they can be sometimes misdiagnosed with ADHD just being they say it's just being a boy. Like, school isn't designed for sitting down for long periods of time for boys. Boys are generally have a more ADHD kind of brain naturally. So if you're including all the girls in there, and then you go, arguably it'd be right down the middle, right? If there's on the spectrum of boy to girl to guy, if you think it's a spectrum. For this example, it's a spectrum,
right?
Even though it's probably binary. It's going to be right in the middle, and all the boys then will be more ADHD. That's not going to line up perfectly, but most girls are going to be less ADHD.
Well, they're harder to diagnose because they typically don't show. That's the problem with ADHD. Is it's quite hard to diagnose unless you have the hyperactive case of it, where you're that kid who's just like bouncing off walls in class, yelling out constantly, like interrupting. If you're more like inattentive, which is what I have, it's very easy to go on. And I mean, I was still somewhat disrupted. I certainly was a less than average behavioral student. And I often look back, I'm like, geez, how did no one like sort of see this pattern here? But I guess it just wasn't extreme enough.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it could have possibly been just lumped in with like other people. For example, there's that guy from our class who was intelligent as heck but could not apply himself and still get excellences.
Yes.
Yeah. It's like if you just get grouped in the boys that play up and misbehave, it's like, oh, well, you might just be that guy.
Yes, I think that's what it was a case of.
Oh, he's just hanging out with those boys.
Stupid. Yeah. He's just stupid, which is somewhat ironic because I don't think I'm very stupid. You're
not.
Yeah. I still remember it was hilarious. I'd been withdrawn, which is like getting kicked out of a class, and I was in the withdrawal room in the office, and a teacher came in, and it was me and another guy, and he said, "Oh, what are you two in here for?" And we said, "Oh, we were Mr. Pithy thought we were hacking." It's you two hacking, like it's really so stupid.
Yeah,
it's like, well, actually, I'm not a hacker, but I was pretty good with computers, probably better than average with computers. So,
even then, there's misconception. That's pretty concerning. That the teachers at the time, it's like 2000s, they should probably be more aware of the...
Yeah, well, it's early 2010s.
That would have been like 2012, might have been, I think it was year 13, I think.
Yeah, to just assume, well, no, I mean, yeah. And that's not necessarily just from an ignorance about ADHD. He could just not have much to do with you and assume that.
Yeah.
I've heard about you.
Yeah, I think that was that. I think that was the case of it, and it's more that no, it just wasn't in the right environment. Like had it been, a pathway, something that I was interested in or whatever I was good at, something at that point in time probably would have been something to do with computers. Then I would have looked like one of the brightest kids in the class. Like I was able to build computers. Not many kids at that age could build computers. I would have been in the, probably being liberal, like 10% of kids could build a computer. So like if there was like a computer building class, I would have been the best student. Yeah. But there wasn't. It was stuff like Excel and Microsoft Word and writing essays and maths, which I'm not good at.
Which is kind of why there's that distinguishable difference between people who like might go to university as opposed to polytech. Like, just it's not going to suit everyone. You can't. You got to make that decision. We'll talk about if you're going to study and take on like student loans, for example, you better make sure you know what you want to do. There's no point going into it with not realizing, and there's no harm not going to university if you want to study, be a plumber. Like it's the way things are, I think, and that's why you probably see. I'd have to find the statistics, but like women as a proportion, there's more women in university than men.
I think that's probably true. I know that at the very least they're more successful.
Yeah, because like their ability to study and sit still is probably a lot higher than like males, and traditionally like we would historically take on roles like lumberjack and things like outside and outdoorsy and farming and that sort of stuff, whereas women, whether you would call it like a housewife, for
Yeah, yeah.
example.
No,
Back
no.
in time,
Yeah.
it's just more like
Sewing,
just
knitting.
And so I guess that's where it gets messy, and I guess that's where hopefully it's better. The recognition is continually getting better, and some of the more subtle signs of it might be picked up that weren't picked up when I was at school. It still might be hard, but I guess that's where it gets messy, where perhaps a naughty boy can look like he has ADHD, but he might not, and as he grows up, I guess that's where I think it becomes glaringly obvious, and this is certainly becoming like a big thing, is adults like myself getting diagnosed with it. They weren't diagnosed as a child, and I think that's sort of the litmus test for it, is that if you're an adult and you're finding life is just getting harder and harder, which is like the opposite of what people think of ADHD. It's like, oh, it's a child thing, you grow out of it. It's like, if you're finding it getting harder and harder as an adult because there's more responsibilities, it's harder to mask, it's very easy to hide at school, and there's a large support network and your parents do everything. It becomes, for me, harder and harder as I get older. So I guess that's kind of, I don't know, like the only, and that's where
it's an interesting point. Yeah, I would have assumed, like, I just by default.
I think it's the complete opposite, because, like I say, as a child, it's very easy to mask because there's, you don't have to earn money. Your parents do everything. School, it's not really that important. And as I think the big one in my case, like that is your social life. School is the glue. It's the bubble. So for me, socializing, making friendships, maintaining a relationship is a great weakness of mine. But when school puts you in with 800 other boys, social life flows. You don't have to put any effort in. But then as soon as that goes away, once you leave school, it's like bang, social life gone. So I think that's where it can become glaringly obvious, is when you're an adult and you're like, because you've had all these masking abilities that worked while you're at school, and they no longer work. You can't have a social life if you don't like work in an office, self-employed, without school, without going out and actually having to put in effort.
Well, that's a good point. Like, I didn't think about it in that sense, but my first job coming out of high school, and also when I was at high school, like, I was fortunate the fact that I had friends in the workplace, because it's like it kind of
kickstart.
It kind of like overflowed in a way. It's like I did notice the first time going to university, because of going to an all boys school, like, pretty difficult to talk to females in that environment, and then if you got put in like a group project or something, it's like general awkwardness. But like, fortunate that my workplace and where I met your partner, it was like pretty tight knit, and we'd hang out and go for coffees and stuff like that. But if you're in an environment like starting a new job, you don't know anybody, like, can take time, and sometimes might not even like happen.
So I think of course I'm coming from for others with ADHD, their big thing is the executive dysfunction side of it. So that would be people struggling to hold down a job because they can't, whatever, bored, they can't do the work, they're constantly late or whatever. That's not an issue for me, because I've been fortunate to be self-employed and figure out ways to make money on the internet, doing things I generally like. So I've been fortunate. My issue is the emotional dysregulation, creating friendships, relationships, maintaining them. Like, obviously, the big obvious one in my life is I've never had a long-term girlfriend. I've had one official girlfriend for 1 week. No,
that's not so.
But so
I know what you mean.
For others with ADHD, it'll be other different things, and I think it becomes more obvious as an adult, and I think that's increasingly becoming a thing. It's the adult diagnosis of, it's probably hasn't changed a hell of a lot in kids. Might have changed a little bit, gone up a bit, but it's the adults where it's, because that never used to happen. It was considered a child thing, but now all these sort of obvious symptoms, chances are if someone's got undiagnosed ADHD, they'll have a severe weakness deficiency in their life. As say for me, relationships, social things. Others, it'll be holding down a job. It'll be something that will stand out like a sore thumb.
I just want to say as well, for the complete opposite to the things that you're conscious of being good and bad at, are the same things that I'm like. kind of almost envious of you. Like,
Yeah.
damn, you actually do your own thing and actually make money and not just like do it for a month and then be like, oh,
So,
and then I'm grateful that I'm quite like, I think even possibly by neurotypical standards, certainly by neurodivergent standards, like relating to people.
I would say
I find it quite easy.
You're an
Yeah.
expert.
Yeah,
You're
like-
the best out of us three here. You're
Oh, totally. Yeah, like when we were out
Thanks.
recording the weekend interviewing, like
yeah,
there's no way I could do what you were doing.
no.
Thanks.
And even
Yeah.
I remember when we went to that protest last year, we bumped into that guy, the mechanic. Do you remember that? He was a mechanic, and he came up to me and yarned.
The COVID protest?
Brent.
Oh, yeah?
You can't even remember. See, that
No.
must be
I
how
wasn't there.
insignificant in the social interaction. But you just
Yeah.
like, you had no idea who he was, and you just like flowed. And I think even like offered, like, I think you said, oh, do you have a ride? Like, you were going to offer to give him a ride. I was like, fuck, man. Like, it's been so
Yeah.
uncomfortable to me. And to you, it was just nothing.
Thanks.
Like,
Well, yeah, like example with you, like doing your own job and selling stuff.
Yeah,
Like,
sorry.
I've thought about something like that, and then I just talk to myself as like, oh, but then I'd have to apply for like tax and those
Yeah.
sort of things, and it's just like, nah, it's not worth
Yeah.
it. Whereas realistically, I could just be like, hey, I want to do this or try this. Can you help me or show me what to do? Maybe that's the approach we need to take. Like
Yep.
we talked about, if there's a dream job that you want to achieve, well, maybe you best find someone in that position
Yeah.
or near that position and
Yep.
ask for a coffee and like pick their brain or
Mhm.
something. It's just too hard.
And
Like, it can be
I-
hard to do that.
just
Yeah.
say like,
Yeah.
I'm super glad that I do have the abilities. Admittedly, a lot of it was just luck, but I tried things, and the more you try things, it's like
Sell
buying lotto
yourself short.
tickets. It opens the door to you getting lucky, the right time, right place, sort of thing to capitalize, like selling fidget spinners. So I'm stoked that I've had like that ability, but I've come to the realization probably recently, like the reason that I do what I do is a massive overcompensation for my weaknesses, because I couldn't go out, like the idea of a job interview and working with other people was such an enormous fear to me that it was easier to go and figure out how can I make money online, which might seem impossible to you.
It was like a last resort.
Yeah, and it was like, this is my only option. So
Yeah.
because my fear of going out and working a regular job was so
Right.
Stronger
intense.
than your
So,
desire to.
yeah, it was a massive overcompensation. But as I say, don't get me wrong, I'm super glad that I figured it out, but that could so easily go wrong if I don't figure it out, and then I'm on a benefit. And
Yeah, it's all part of
Just,
the empathy thing. It's like you take it for granted, but like to neurotypicals, that kind of solo job is like just can't seem to do it. Your logical brain can go like, yeah, I could do this. I'm smart enough. And then your emotional brain's like, oh, I'm too tired today, man. Like talking to yourself, too tired. Like, who cares? Oh, like you haven't made any money in like a month. Just quit it.
Or like, oh, it's okay if you have a rest day, or like,
yeah,
there's merit to both. Like,
yeah,
in terms of exercising, some people say no, exercise, just do it every day, and then for other, like you probably need to let your body rest and recover. But in terms of just like everyday life and wanting to achieve goals and whatnot, if it really is a priority to you, you kind of just have to do it. Like you can't. And I'm not saying I get it right all the time, because I will make excuses for myself not to do something. But then it's like, I know, like I can logically say, yeah, I know I need to do this.
Mhm.
But then, my emotions like, nah, like it's okay if you have a like day off. You worked hard this week. It's like you've got to just
and
sometimes
I would be
just bite the bullet.
I would have been the same, but as I say, it was my only option.
Yeah.
Because it's easy if you're working a 9 to 5 or even just part time at a high school. You've got that
lit
income.
the fire under your ass.
Yeah, I had nothing. I was on a benefit briefly for about a year,
Mm.
and then the reason I didn't stay on the benefit is because I had to go in for an interview, and I was like, I'm not going. I can't deal with that. I'm not going in for an interview. So I was like, I better figure out how the hell I can make money.
Yeah.
So for me, it was the case of like burning the boats. I had no other option.
I can't remember where I heard it, but it's like there was a test done on a rat where they like dangled cheese in front of it, and they had him on a wheel, like seeing what speed they were running at towards the cheese, even though they couldn't get it. And then behind them, they open up a door which like lets in the scent of a cat, and they started running faster because the fear of the cat behind them made them, even though they were so it's not the fact they were chasing it, it's the fear of of the cat that was making them run
the
fast.
burning the boat when your life is on the line.
Yeah,
obviously, it wasn't
you
literally
kind of have to do
yeah,
it.
it wasn't literally on the line, but to me, I was thinking like,
it's this or homelessness.
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, my parents would bail me out, but I didn't want, that. And I wanted to have a proper life. So, and so and also the fact that, I didn't really have a social life. So I just spend all day working on stuff, and I still don't have a hell of much of a social life. So I've got all the time in the world to focus on this stuff because I don't have a wife at home and 10 friends to have coffee with and manage, I'm not one of those people who's always, sorry, I can't, I'm busy this week. I've always got time. So, swings and roundabouts, isn't it?
Yeah. I think it's probably final thoughts times.
Sure.
I'll start off by saying, I think some of the coolest part of being alive and people in general is that we are so different, and a bit of empathy, it's been said before a million times, empathy is real valuable on a societal level. And so maybe we could all try and be more empathetic.
Yes,
more empathy the better.
100%.
But that's going to be good for society, like learning how different people's realities are because their brains are so different. But it doesn't stop you from having regressive and offensive opinions like I do that people should harden the fuck up.
Yeah. It's so easy. I always say I oscillate between being a ruthless social Darwinist and a socialist. Some days of the month I'm in an empathetic mood where I'm understanding of people and people living in poverty or whatever, struggling mentally, whatever it is. And then other days I'm just like, well, it's the way of the world. It's ruthless, and if you can't figure it out, then
So
I oscillate between two extremes.
I'm probably similar to David. Like, if you say you're going through a Macca's drive-through or something, sometimes there might be someone there asking for food, and like the empathy in my heart and is like, man, I feel like I should do this. And then other times it's just like I could probably just ignore it and just drive right through. And it's kind of sad, like thinking about it when you have the chance to reflect on it. But like you say, if you apply it to my own life, well, in some ways, I know I just have to get over things. Yeah. Like, it was a fear buying a house is having to deal with all the utilities and stuff and organizing like internet and organizing power. But it's like, well, if the gas runs out, I just have to, like, as much as I hate dealing with that, you have to do it, or you're not going to be able to have a shower.
Yeah. I think it comes down. There's two. I think ultimately there's only ever two options. Where like you let whatever you're struggling with beat you, or you don't.
Yeah. And I think another thing that helps me be empathetic is I often come back and think just how close I am to everything disappearing. It can very easily disappear. And if you think about it, maybe for you, you'd be able to pick up another job easily. You may or may not. I don't know how you'd back yourself. But think about that. The business, rough year in business, layoffs, and then all of a sudden you're out of a job. It's very easy to sort of be brash and unsympathetic when you're in a job, but just envision what would your life be like if you lost your job. And that's what I'm saying. Like, for me, I think that, geez, it's so close that this could dry up, and then I'm stuffed. Then I'll be one of these people doing nothing. And I think, geez, I hope there'll be someone there to help me if that does happen. Hopefully it won't. But you just have to kind of remind yourself that just because things that you've seemingly got it all figured out at the moment, that can quickly change. Yeah.
Fair points.
Yeah.
Well spoken as well, yeah.
No, that's
stoked with that one.
Probably a good way to end it. I don't really have any more final thoughts on that.
I guess.
Thanks for being open, David.
Yeah, it's fine. I would say it's something that historically haven't been good at. I only started having these conversations in the last 18 months, especially probably the last 6 months.
It's epic, man.
I guess my final take would be whatever you're suffering from, whether it be a learning disability, ADHD, dyslexia, autism, or just struggling with depression, anxiety, try and just find the silver linings in it. I guess with depression and anxiety that might be a bit harder, but with ADHD, and almost certainty there will be strengths that you have that others would be envious of, and just try and hone in, maximize your positive, strong skills and minimize the weaknesses as much as possible, I guess.
I think also just to add on to that, like Reddit, for example, is a real good in some ways it can be cancerous, but yeah, like there's always communities for certain things. So whether you're into like a sports team or whatever, or you're going through ADHD, I'm sure there's subreddits for like people experiencing that, or like personal finance if you're wanting to like build wealth. Like there's so many. The internet is a vast place, and often you can find the answers you're looking for just by like going down that rabbit hole. Yeah, just looking for them. They probably appear right before your eyes, but then it's all about applying it, I guess.
Yeah, and I guess actually one more thing to add would be whatever, if you suspect you have an LD, learning disability, or you're super depressed but you're too embarrassed to ask for help, do it. I was the same. Super embarrassing to talk to your doctor about that and ask for a referral to a psychiatrist. I put it off for years because of that, thinking how embarrassing that would be and a massive
It's
weakness.
scarier than a driver's license test.
way scarier, scarier. But I did it, and I think I get maybe not stronger every day, but I'm getting stronger over time, and being open about it and embracing it, and still have my days where I feel embarrassed and pathetic.
That's the best you can hope for, eh?
Yeah,
Overall,
but I think it'll be a net positive in your life if you're really struggling with whatever it is, to go and seek help, whether it be a family, friend, doctor, psychiatrist, therapy. Do it, especially if you're a male, because I know it is a bigger problem for males than females. Everyone in general, but especially if you're a male, don't be embarrassed.
So,
because look at this.
Start a podcast.
I thought everyone would sort of like drop me. Not that I have heaps of friends, but I thought that everyone would look at me differently and think I'm pathetic if I came out about these things. Sorry, I'm gonna end up talking again, but
go for it.
I was diagnosed with social anxiety when I was like 18, the year out of school, so 19, and I lived a lie about that. So I was on a benefit. It was a sickness benefit, not unemployment benefit, because my doctor wrote the note, whatever about that. I didn't even ask for it. He just said, you have every right to this. And I lived a lie. I lied to people, said that I was doing temping with trade staff, and I was just living a lie, telling people that I had a job. And
so you never had a job with temping?
I did. No, okay. I did, but very temporarily. Right. But for a long, it was always
twice.
Yeah,
once,
it was one-offs. So there was it was a quarter truth. But I was living a lie.
Technically the truth.
I was living a lie because I was so embarrassed. I thought if I said that I have social anxiety, that everyone would look at me differently. But that's not the case. So
good advice.
Yeah,
to anyone listening.
Yeah, I think there's an abundance of help out there. Like same with like self-help, for example. There's the whole self-help community. So despite what you're going through, I'm sure there's ways that you can at least go down that journey and find out more about yourself and be more open and honest with yourself.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's in the quiet times for me that I find it the easiest. So like having a shower, just like driving if I'm not listening to something, like that's the most beneficial time for me, I guess, to like level up. And
Yep.
But we'll wrap it up there.
Sounds good.
Episode 36.
I don't think I had a voice crack.
Nice.
True.
Yeah, no, I didn't pick up on it.
A good episode for that.
Can you give us a goodbye with an intentional voice crack?
Goodbye.
Goodbye.
Sweet. Well, we're on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter. You can find us there on YouTube as well.
Yep.
Not sure what we're talking about next time.
Testosterone.
Oh, yeah.
We're gonna.
Yeah.
We could like testosterone might be too niche, but maybe testosterone /
off the pod.
Yeah. Anyways, that's us for this week. Thanks for listening, and we will see you next time.
Later.
Peace.
Peace.